All right, welcome to this edition of my little microphone here. Welcome to this edition of the Loud and Devoted podcast. My name is NativeSeahawk, otherwise known as Aaron Thomas. And it took them a little bit of time, like they did trying to find Clint Kubiak, but the Seahawks decided to go ahead and announce. Last night, I went to bed thinking, who the hell are they going to have as their quarterback coach? Who are they going to have to help round out the offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak's coaching room? And they announced it this morning. And we're trying to figure out who the heck are these guys. And it means a lot because it's not just the fact that you've got guys in the offensive coordinator room, but the assistants to the offensive coordinator are very, very important for many reasons. Excuse me. And let's go ahead and share the screen. We'll start with my guy. This is the one I've been wanting and I've been clamoring for a little while. And his name is Andrew Janocko. And Janocko is 37 years old. He is about the same age as both Clint Kubiak and Coach Mike Mack, which is an interesting kind of like, okay, let's get some guys that are sort of in the same age group. And age does matter, believe it or not, and good and bad. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But the reason why I was so high on Janocko, Janico, I don't know how you say his name, but the reason why I was so high on him is you look at the data. Those of you that follow me on this podcast, I like to start with data first. The guy could be amazing. He could be nice. He could be great to work with. That's great and fine and dandy, which it matters. Don't get me wrong. He's probably a good fit for those reasons, but he brings with him some good data. For Janico, he was a quarterbacks coach in 2021 for the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, they won 8-9, but they had a tremendously horrible defense back in 2021. They're not the same Vikings as they are today. They've done a really good job over the last few years to really rebuild that defense in Minnesota. But when he was the quarterbacks coach for Minnesota, along with Clint Kubiak, who was the offensive coordinator, there was a lot of amazing things happening in Minnesota. That happened to be the year that Kirk Cousins, old man Kirk, had an amazing season that year: 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and the offense was top 10. The 2021 Vikings did a really good job of their rush pass ratio was a lot better than it was last year in Seattle. They were about 43% rush percentage, whereas Seattle was at 39% last year. So what does that matter? What matters is the fact that you need a quarterbacks coach that when they do actually pass, because you can't run the ball all the time, 100% of the time, you need somebody that can help the quarterback with the details to really understand Clint Kubiak's offensive scheme. You need whoever it's going to be under center, Gino, if it's Sam Howell, if it's Darnold, if it's whoever it is. Yes, some people even are clamoring for Russell Wilson to come back to Seattle. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Anyway, whoever's going to be under center, and eventually you're going to hopefully draft a quarterback this year, finally, to help develop. You need somebody that understands the scheme, that understands the details. That's what why these assistant positions are so important, not only on the defense, but also on the offense and in special teams. These are the guys that have the technical details, why it's so important to these position coaches are so important to the overall puzzle. And, if you look at Janico again, so they were did very, very well in Minnesota that season. And again, on offense, not so much on defense. Then we'll take a look at, the other person that they decided to go out and get in Seattle, which is kind of, it doesn't confuse me why they went out and got John Benton. The offensive line, of course, was the worst part of the season last year for Seattle. And if we found somebody that could literally have the technical wherewithal to come in and help not only the guys that are currently on the squad, but any other new free agents that we pick up or any draft picks that come in, to really round out that offensive line. You're going to need a coach like John Benton, who's long in the tooth. He is not 37 years old by any means. 19 years coaching in the NFL and in college. Started out in Colorado State, went to St. Louis Rams. That's how old this guy is. This is back when the Rams were in St. Louis. He was with the Texans, the Dolphins. But the reason why it's important for Clint Kubiak is they coached last year together in New Orleans. And again, these were the two seasons where in New Orleans and in Minnesota that Clint Kubiak is sort of the reason why he's the offensive coordinator today in Seattle. He earned his stripes. I listen to other podcasters, and some of them are very not only lukewarm on the idea of Kubiak as offensive coordinator, but they just are pretty much trashing Kubiak as the choice because of all the other guys they could have had. Kubiak is as legitimate, I believe. He has not a lot of history. That's his only downfall. He doesn't have 5 to 10 years as offensive coordinator somewhere. But very successful offensive coordinators in this league do not last 5 or 10 years in this season in this league. They end up becoming head coaches. And so, it's very rare, like a Ben Johnson, who was the offensive coordinator for Detroit Lions, lasted as long as he did. And he had to, he, by his choice, turned down head coaching positions last year and finally decided to take on that role in Chicago. And so here you got Clint Kubiak. He's had great beginning of 2024 in New Orleans. It raised a bunch of eyebrows. What the hell's going on in New Orleans? They're scoring all these points. They looked at what he did in Minnesota. And, he had some stints in there. Again, we've discussed Clint Kubiak quite a bit on this podcast. He's the one that broke in Brock Purdy, this no-name quarterback who's now set to probably make $40 to $50 million a year in San Francisco. And so Kubiak's got some he's legitimate. He's a legitimate offensive coordinator. Will that mean a lot this year? It has to. It has to mean a lot. This is going to be a real make or break season, I believe, for John Schneider, especially. The guy that got the keys to the Lamborghini. They didn't get to the promised land. They didn't even get to the playoffs this year. But winning 10 games will help you get closer. And so these position coaches that we're talking about today, Janico and now John Benton, is, again, now he's got to figure out the tight ends coach. We'll get to that in a second. But again, when you're looking at the 2024 New Orleans Saints, and again, you have to look at last year's data with sort of a grain of salt because, it was sort of a tale of two seasons for them. The first 3 games of the season, and then everybody got injured, including their starting quarterback, and it all went off the rails the rest of the season. But the play calling, again, was better than in the way that Mike Mack wants it. It was heavy run. 44% of the time last year, the Saints were able to run the ball. And again, it was versus 39% that Grubb had in Seattle. So you're looking at a full 5% difference in running attempts in New Orleans last year. And you need a great offensive line coach that's going to help you with those run and pass protection. And Benton's your guy. He was in New Orleans last year. It looked like he didn't coach in 2023. He must have took a year off. But he was with the Jets for a few years, was in San Francisco. This is another big kind of like aha moment for me when I looked at Benton's history, where he was in the offensive line coach for the 49ers. This is back when the defense was ran by Sela. And if you're running an offensive line in Seattle and you're going up against Sela twice a season, you're going to need to have an offensive line coach that understands Coach Sela's run defense, his defensive schemes. Benton can help you with that and game planning and getting the guys ready in the trenches to go and protect the quarterback, protect the running backs. And this was a huge, I didn't even think about John Benton for some reason because I didn't look at his past. I was going for another guy named Craig, Cregg, who was the actual offensive line coach, assistant offensive line coach in San Francisco the last few years. especially in 2023 when that 49er run game was at its peak. Craig was the offensive line coach there, but I'll take this. I'll take a guy that has went up against Robert Sela in practice, 3-4 times a week, and because that, again, that's what's going to help Seattle game plan and try to take the West back. And you're going to need to go through the 49ers to do that this year, in my opinion. So good. Great. I would say a great start so far for Clint Kubiak. You got Benton, you've got Benton, you've got Janico, two guys that he's coached with in the past, two guys that are probably good fits because of the fact they've worked together. They're coming out to the West, the Northwest, and they're going to figure out how to take the West back, the NFC West back. So kudos for Kubiak. I love it. Like I said earlier, I would love to see Seattle go after Brian Periani. Now, the tight end coach position, that one right now is there's a guy in there now that's I believe his name is Brown. He's the tight ends coach for your Seahawks right now. They already got rid of Huff, who was the offensive line coach, in lieu of getting Benton. So now, why is the tight end coach so important in Seattle? Because Clint Kubiak really utilizes the tight ends, and he needs to have somebody that knows, again, his scheme, knows his system, knows his playbook really, really well. And Brian Periani, who's not even coaching right now, could actually slide right in as the tight ends coach. And they worked together in Minnesota in 2021, again, when Kirk Cousins had that great season, and they were doing very well in the pass game. So interesting. That's the last sort of piece of the puzzle. My only thought now going forward is now trying to figure out how the heck Seattle is going to, because I keep saying this, Seattle is going to have a top 10 defense in 2025. Mark it, put it on the calendar right now. I said that. They've trended that way from the second half of last season into the final weeks. They're going to get better. This whole talk about getting Myles Garrett coming to Seattle, I don't think that's going to happen. They just don't have the draft capital, and they have a lot bigger fish to fry on the offensive side to get a Garrett. But you never know. The offense, on the other hand, so the defense is going to be a top 10, and you need the offense to be, I'd say, top 15 or top 17 in the league for them to go pretty far in the playoffs. I think this could round out. You could actually have, depending on some other key decisions they have to make, especially under center, could Seattle have a top 12 offense and a top 10 defense? I think they can. I don't think that there is any question in my mind at this moment in February 3rd, week before the Super Bowl. I don't think that there's a question that they could have a top 12 offense where you see Seattle get to the NFC Championship game. And if that happens, of course, the hot name that everybody's going to say again that they want as head coach is Clint Kubiak. His name came up a year ago, 2 years ago, as a possibility to take on the role of head coach. So who's waiting in the wings? Who's going to be the guy? Are they going to have to start all over again next January or February if they make it very far to try to figure out who's going to run their offense? So those are the only question marks I have, and why I'm kind of hoping they go for finding somebody that could be an assistant offensive coordinator just in case Kubiak does decide to roll out to become a head coach somewhere. So those are my only thoughts and my concerns going forward. But I love the addition of Janico. I love Benton. These are some really great hires, as I've said before. And let's see if they can go out and get get Periani, the tight ends coach, who's not even coaching right now. He's kind of consulting out there in the NFL or in the college or even high school universe right now. So my name is NativeSeahawk Aaron Thomas. Go Hawks, let's go. We're getting closer, you guys. It's a long off season, so stay with me as we continue on and talking about our beloved Seahawks team, trying to make this off season go quicker than normal because we're talking about them and we're trying to figure out how to cope without seeing our Seahawks out there, especially right before the Super Bowl. It's kind of the excruciating week leading up to Super Bowl Sunday. Take care.